Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into a pretty thought-provoking paper today. AI ethics is a hot topic, and we're all about understanding the nuances, right? So this paper, it really makes you pause and think, like, what are the fundamental limits when we talk about machines making moral choices?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about, the latest algorithm or some new rule book for AI. It's deeper than that. It's like almost like a philosophical exploration. It makes you wonder, like, can an AI truly be ethical if it can't even, doubt?
Whoa, that's a big one right out of the gate.
Oh,
Okay, so for our listeners, why is this question even important? I mean, this paper isn't going to tell you how to code ethics into your AI.
right. It's not a how-to guide, but it helps us grasp the really fundamental challenges of this whole AI morality thing. Like, how do we even approach it? It's about recognizing the differences between how we as humans deal with right and wrong and how AI systems, as they are now, function.
Totally. And what I find really cool about this paper is it's not just like a computer science thing. It brings in philosophy, it brings in psychology. It's like this interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah, definitely. It's pulling from all these different fields to paint a bigger picture.
So what's the paper's core argument? What's the main takeaway here?
Okay, so the paper argues that AI, as we know it, right, it bumps up against this fundamental limitation. It can't be truly ethical because it lacks some essential parts of the human mind that are, crucial for morality. They focus on three main things: how our knowledge is grounded in our senses, our capacity for genuine understanding, and then this is the big one, the ability to doubt. And, for our listeners, the implication is, for now, the really tough ethical calls, those probably should stay with us humans.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, the paper, it doesn't just jump into AI ethics. It spends a good chunk of time setting this stage, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is ethics in general?
Yeah, exactly. It lays down this foundation by looking at ethics as a whole branch of philosophy. It reminds us that ethics, the study of morality, like good and bad, right and wrong, responsibility, that's been around for centuries, millennia even. And then it goes through the big schools of thought, the ones that have shaped our understanding of morality for ages.
So like the classic philosophers,
Yeah.
like Aristotle, the Kant, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They start with virtue ethics, going all the way back to Aristotle, focus on character, virtues, not just a list of rules. They even mention how it's had a modern revival with people like MacIntyre and Anscombe, and they point out how these virtues are all interconnected. And then you have deontology, which is all about rules and duty, Kant's territory, like the categorical imperative, acting out of goodwill. But here's the thing for AI, right? How do you program exceptions into absolute rules? AI runs on logic, so how do you code those gray areas?
It's a great point. Like, yeah, a self-driving car shouldn't hit a pedestrian, but what if swerving means causing a bigger accident? How do you code for that?
Exactly. It's a big challenge translating those kinds of judgments into code. And then they move on to consequentialism, judging actions by their outcomes, maximizing good, like Mill's utilitarianism. But again, for AI, how can it predict every single consequence? And what about the risk of ignoring the rights of the few for the quote unquote greater good? And they also touch on some other ethical views, pragmatist, intuitionist, all those, pointing out that they're more human-centered, more about the context, and that just makes the whole idea of a universal AI morality even trickier.
Yeah, it's like they're showing us that human ethics, it's not just this neat and tidy system, ready to be plugged into a machine.
Right. And then to hammer that point home, they bring in moral psychology, What do people actually do in moral dilemmas? And there's this fascinating finding that you might not expect. Turns out we often make moral judgments based on intuition, gut feelings, and only after that do we try to find a logical, ethical reason for it.
So we feel something's wrong first, and then our brain scrambles to come up with a why. That's so interesting.
Right. It's like our gut leads the way. And they even mention Haight's work on this, but of course there's still debate about the role of intuition and conscious thought in moral judgment, even among the experts. But the point is, intuition seems to play a big role, especially as you get more experienced in moral reasoning.
So it's not just pure logic, it's like this gut feeling that even the experts rely on.
Yeah, it's a part of the process. So, okay, we see how complex and often intuitive human ethics is. Now, how does all of this actually relate to AI ethics, and how does it affect our listeners?
Right, how do we bridge that gap?
Well, that's where the paper gets really specific. They frame AI ethics as this attempt to apply these messy, often debated ethical ideas to the digital world, which is all about, ones and zeros, clear-cut instructions. They make the point that a lot of the stuff written about AI ethics, it's very theoretical, like, oh, here's how this theory might apply to a self-driving car in this situation. But the problem is AI developers, they need practical guidance, not just philosophical debates.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about Kant and self-driving cars. It's another thing entirely to translate that into code that a car can use in real time.
Totally. And then the paper goes into the limitations of deep learning, the popular AI approach. They say, even if we had this massive, perfect data set of human moral choices, it'd still be super hard to define every single factor, every type of moral decision an AI might face. Like, think about AlphaGo. It needed to play billions of games to master Go. How many moral games would an AI need to play? And even more importantly, AI ethics isn't just a technical problem. It's tangled up with the fundamental issues in ethics itself, the things we as humans still grapple with.
So it's not just about the data.
Yeah.
It's that we don't have a perfect understanding of morality to begin with.
Exactly. And to understand their approach, they lay out their methodology. They call it phenomenological within a critical interpretivist paradigm. Okay, let me put that in simpler terms. They're basically trying to understand the phenomenon of AI ethics by setting aside any preconceived ideas and really digging into the core issues rather than jumping straight to solutions.
So they're mapping the problem before giving directions.
Exactly. And then they get into their core arguments. The first one is this idea of indwelling. It's the idea that all knowledge comes from our senses, our experiences in the world. They cite thinkers like Polanyi and Strati who say our bodies, our senses, they're essential to how we understand things. And they even expand sensing beyond the five senses. They include visceral feelings, emotions, even internal mental sensations.
It's not just what we see and hear, it's the whole experience.
Right, the whole package.
Yeah.
And then they talk about how this indwelling extends even to abstract concepts. We can't physically touch a math equation, but our understanding of it is still based on our sensory experiences, how we make sense of the world. They bring in philosophers like Dreyfus and Searle, who've argued that AI can't truly think because it doesn't have the sensory connection to the world. And this paper, they take that idea and apply it to morality. They say, without this grounding in sensory experience, AI can't be truly moral. They're not saying reasoning isn't important, but that you need both sensing and reasoning.
It's like trying to understand grief by just reading a definition without ever having felt it. You miss that deep, personal, sensory part.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And their second argument, it's about understanding. They point out that even in cognitive psychology, we don't have a single agreed upon definition of what it means to truly understand something. They mention Akoff, who says understanding is somewhere between knowledge and wisdom. And they highlight Polanyi's concept of tacit knowledge, that know-how we have that's hard to explain.
Like knowing how to shoot a basketball without being able to explain the physics of it.
Exactly. It's like an instinct, a feeling. And they connect this idea of understanding to ethics. To make good moral decisions, you have to understand the consequences, the ethical rules, the nuances of virtues like compassion. And then they look at historical predictions about AI achieving these complex cognitive tasks, like Herbert Simon's optimistic views. And they compare that to what we see now, where AI still seems to lack this true understanding.
Like when chatbots go off the rails, or when AI image generators make these surreal, illogical pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Or the example they use in the paper where this Go-playing AI is repeatedly beaten by this super simple, almost nonsensical strategy. It's like AI can be amazing at processing information, but it doesn't necessarily get it. It doesn't understand in the same way.
So it's mimicking thought, but not actually thinking.
Right. And that leads to their third and maybe most interesting argument, doubt.
Okay, this is the big one.
Yeah. They go back to Descartes, I think, therefore I am, but they put a spin on it. Dubito ergo sum, which means I doubt, therefore I am. They're saying doubt isn't just an intellectual thing, it's crucial for morality. To act ethically, you have to be able to doubt yourself, your actions, your motives.
Like that little voice inside, that hesitation before you do something.
Exactly. And they argue that doubt, it's not separate from our senses and our understanding. We sense a situation, we try to understand it ethically, and then we doubt, we question if we're doing the right thing. And what's interesting is there's not much talk about doubt in AI ethics literature. So they ask, what does it mean for ethics if we have an intelligence that can't doubt?
It makes you wonder, if an AI can't doubt, can it be held accountable?
Right. It's a big question. And in their conclusion, they kind of sum it all up. AI ethics is complicated, it's multifaceted. Just programming ethics in or having AI learn it through data, that's not enough because we don't have a perfect moral example. And the types of moral decisions are endless. They highlight how human judgment is intuitive, how morality is grounded in experience and understanding, and how doubt is essential.
But they do offer some ideas for how AI can be helpful, right? Even with these limitations.
Yeah, they do. They say AI could be a tool to trigger our own self-doubt. Like it could point out patterns or conflicts in ethical models as we're thinking through a problem. Or it could scan situations for things we might miss, things that could mean we need to reevaluate our choices ethically.
Like an ethical alarm bell.
Yeah, kind of. And then they give this really thought-provoking idea. Maybe the problems we face aren't AI ethics problems. Maybe they're just our existing ethical problems amplified by AI, because AI lacks those things we talked about, the sensing, the understanding, the doubting. It could make our ethical strengths and weaknesses more pronounced.
Yeah, flips the script, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It puts the responsibility back on us to really figure out our own ethics.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now time for our novel notion segment. Based on this whole discussion about doubt, what are some interesting research directions, some new ways to think about this?
Okay, well, building on the doubt thing, one area could be to develop AI that can actually doubt, in a deeper way than just probabilistic uncertainty. Like not just saying I'm 80% sure, but actually questioning its own reasoning in ethical situations, like seeking out contradictory information, recognizing the limits of its knowledge, even like simulating an internal debate.
Like an AI arguing with itself.
Yeah, kind of. You could even have like an AI ethicist agent that acts as the devil's advocate,
Yeah.
challenging the AI's decisions, forcing it to justify its choices.
That's pretty wild. What about other research avenues?
Well, another one is this idea of synthetic indwelling. So the paper talks about how important sensory grounding is for human morality. What if we could give AI something like that? Not feelings or consciousness, but a way to process multisensory data, to get a kind of felt sense of morally relevant situations.
So like an AI that can read facial expressions or sense tension in a room.
Right. It wouldn't replace human judgment, but it could give us more information to work with.
That's fascinating. It sounds like science fiction, but maybe it's not so far off.
Who knows? It's all about pushing the boundaries, right? But, it's important to remember these are just ideas. The future of AI ethics is still unfolding.
Absolutely. But this deep dive, it really shows us how complicated this whole thing is. AI has huge potential, but when it comes to ethics, we need to be careful. We need to be aware of its limits.
And as the paper said, it's about looking inward too. AI is reflecting our ethics back at us, so we need to make sure we're happy with what we see.
A lot to think about. We'll put a link to the paper in the description so you can check it out. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.